Hello everyone and welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to be challenging myself to read one book a month for the rest of the year. Reading is something that was so important to me when I was growing up. I read so much as a kid. I was a huge nerd and I read books like crazy, mostly fiction at the time. I enjoyed getting lost in the worlds. And that is something that I want to get back. I still have kept reading in my life, but I have let it slip a little bit. One of the goals of this year and of this series of me, how much can I change my life in a year, find ways to improve or to bring things back into my life that I feel like should be in there. And in this case, reading regularly is something that I was doing for many years as an adult. In the last couple years, I really haven't read anything. One of my challenges to myself is to make sure that I read at least one book every month. And I think I can end up reading more than that once I get in the flow of it, but I want to set the expectations low and I want to make it very reasonable. Books have actually completely transformed my life at times. Certain books read at the right moment in time. You might learn something that you didn't know before from a book that you read that then completely inspires you to go down a different direction that you otherwise never would have gone. And one of the magical things about books is that you get such a deep and nuanced perspective that you don't normally get from other mediums. So I'm going to name a few books that have completely changed my perspective. Each one of them came for me in a different point in my life and had a different level of impact just based on the context of my life. So I'll list off the names of them and then I'll give you some context of why each one is important to me. The first one I actually mentioned in a previous video and it was called Dropping Acid. And Dropping Acid is what opened me to the world of psychedelics. When I read that book, that then allowed me to go into that exploration. And then my life was forever changed by then the psychedelic experiences. But that book was the door into that world. Quick follow-up to that kind of progression and that stage of my life in my young 20s was reading The Book by Alan Watts. And I think the other title is like On the Taboo of Knowing Who You Really Are. That was a book that was just written so charismatically. I mean, Alan Watts, if you've ever heard any of his talks, the dude was charismatic as hell. He would take difficult subjects and nuanced subjects and he would break it down in such a simple and understandable way. I learned so much about myself and my perception of the world and kind of like the different feedback loops that we tend to have on each other. And I found that that book had completely illuminated that self-discovery part of me, which I was already kind of in that mode from the psychedelic experiences. And he actually talks about psychedelics in his talks in general, because at the time I was getting very into his philosophy and just learning things. Another book that I then followed up shortly after when I was getting into this like bettering myself state of mind was The Rise of Superman by Steven Kotler. The Rise of Superman is a book that is all about flow states. And flow states is something that I actually did a whole podcast on, and I'll link it. I'd like to bring it to this channel. I'll probably do a video on flow at some point. When I was learning about flow states, I learned about all the different ways that we can optimize our life for flow and for a state of mind that allows you to learn faster, process information faster, be more efficient, while also it feels good. It's a feel-good state of mind to be in. When I started learning about flow and like how I could implement it into my regular day-to-day life, that was such a practical implementation of the integration that I was trying to do for my psychedelic experiences. Probably like 21 when I read all of these books that I just listed. It was just a time where I was really discovering who I was, the kind of adult I wanted to grow into. Another book that was super transformative for me was Mastery by Robert Greene. Mastery is a book that I read probably when I was 23. I had already done a lot of self-improvement stuff. I already was in a really good state of mind. And then I had just moved to a new city. It was teaching me about how I could master my craft, how I could learn about the skill sets that I wanted to learn, and how I could take those skill sets to the next level based on the experiences of previous masters in history at their crafts. In the book, he breaks down various extremely talented, famous people, all the names you'd expect to be in there, right? And he breaks down just how they learned to master their craft and how non-linear of a journey it was and how important it was to actually deviate and go into different directions and learn something new from something else and come back to then the skill that you're really trying to develop. You then take it to a completely different place because you learn something new in this other activity. And that was something that was just, it's obvious, but it really clicks when you're reading it in the book. And that was a book that I felt like really had helped me take it to the next level. And this was at the time when I was then just starting my podcast and just starting to delve into being creative and posting it and sharing it with the world. and the lessons that I learned from it that are still with me today. So let's get into what am I reading now? What was the book that I decided to create this challenge for myself, and what drove me to choose that as well as this challenge? So the book I'm reading now is The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. And I don't know if you've seen this interview. It's so funny. I don't know if I could put it in this video because it might get claimed. There is this interview of Rick Rubin from Anderson Cooper. He asks him, like, what do you do? If you don't know how to make music, you don't know how to use instruments or mix on the boards, what are they paying you for? I think his answer was like, I get paid for my confidence in my decision making of things that I like and don't like. I thought that was like amazing because Rick Rubin is an amazing producer who clearly knows how to get the best out of artists. He knows how to bring the artist's strengths out of them. And that doesn't mean he's perfect or that everything he's touched has been gold, but he tends to bring out amazing things out of amazing artists. He seems to be in some ways a spirit guide more than anything. He knows what he likes and he's got good taste, but he also really brings out the spiritual side of the creative act. Just reading this book, I'm like a third of the way through it already, and I just started reading it a few days ago. It is exactly what I wanted it to be. I've listened to his podcast, so I'm pretty familiar with Rick Rubin's perspective on a number of things. Finding a book in the exact moment of time that you need it, it's not an accident. There's no such thing as a coincidence. If you read it at the right time, it will resonate with you. And when it resonates with you and it really clicks, there are things that you will see that if you read it at the wrong time, you wouldn't see. And then if you read something again, like you go back to it, you'd be surprised the new things that you'll find or the more nuanced stuff that you read in the book. One of the things that I want to do this year, in addition to reading one book every month, I'm actually going to go back and highlight all of the books that I just listed for you, as well as some others. I'm gonna go over them and I'm gonna talk about why they were important to me and why I think you should read them. I think it'll be a fun series. So it'll just be a totally separate series where I'm gonna just talk about books that I think are good and that I think are worth your read. In that exploration, I'm curious to see, because I'm not going to reread all of the books because I want to read new books this year. In the Kindle app, I highlight a bunch of things that I felt were important or resonated with me. And luckily in the app, it's actually super easy to go and just read the highlights. So I'm probably going to go back, read the highlights of some of these books, see what I learned from it, remind myself of the things that resonated with me to highlight it in the first place, and then just do kind of a little book report of sorts. So we'll start a little book club here. Books can completely expand your horizons. They can change your perspective. They can expand your vocabulary. You can learn new words and new ways of saying things. And those are all different ways of helping you describe the world around you or understanding the world around you. That is a valuable thing that I don't think you get from anything else. It's not that you can't learn something from a video. It's not that you can't learn something from a movie. It's not that you can't learn something from a video game. Look at games like The Last of Us. I know it's trending right now. There are certain things that a book can do that gives you more depth than you can get in anything else. In a video, there's only so much that somebody can do before then they start wasting your time, right? With reading, you can go into the nitty-gritty and people know what they're signing up for with a book. You're given a lot more freedom to really expand upon something, to really see the way that the author thinks, to understand their way of thinking, and to then process it from your own perspective. You get to then internalize and you take the good of what you like from the book and leave the rest. Literally, Rick Rubin says that in his book. I tend to learn more meaningful things, and it tends to stick with me longer than if I just watch a video on something. Watching a video on something, if it really resonates with me, can definitely stick with me. But when I read something, it's like internalized in another level. And I feel like that's something that can't be underestimated. So far, reading at night, it helps me go to sleep instead of scrolling on TikTok. I've been reading in bed, and it's been nice. I'm able to read, 20 pages, 30 pages or something, and I start to get tired, and I'm like, all right, cool. Now I can wind down, and I'll put the iPad away, and I'll go to sleep. So it's helping my sleep. That's like a side effect of it. But also then when I go to sleep, like the information sticks in my head more. The book resonates deeper when you do that. So I really encourage you, like, pick up a book. You don't have to read a lot either. I got a comment on my post when I was asking about how many of you read. I wanted to get a gauge on the audience. Somebody literally said, like, if you read even just one book in a year, you're in a statistically significant percentage of people. Even if you only read 1 or 2 books in a year, I think it's worth it. Like, especially if those books are the right book at the right time. Obviously, you can't always pick that. As I'm learning in this Rick Rubin book, where he talks all about kind of being open and listening, to the universe and letting it transmute through you. Part of that, finding that right book at the right time, is probably you just being open and listening. And if something catches your eye, trust that instinct, trust that clue. Something might really click, and it might be just the right thing at the right time. And you really don't know the ways in which it can completely change where you're going to go in life. So thanks for watching the video. I really appreciate all the support and love that I've gotten from you guys. This has been awesome. Definitely like and subscribe. Do all of that good stuff. Comment below any books that have changed your life. I want to know some books that I can read. I need your suggestions. So if you made it this far in the video, please comment below and say major key, and then say whatever your book is that really changed your life, because I want to read it. If it was that good for you, it's probably that good for me too. All right. Thanks again. Peace.